Hello, this is Pastor Blake, and this is our continued study of Joshua. Now, today we're going to go through Joshua 12, all of the chapter 12, and then parts of chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. After that, the theme changes enough that we're going to continue on in the next video. So, chapter 12 through 13, verse 7. Okay? And so, when we see Joshua, Joshua is starting to really take a look at what he's done. And a lot of ancient documents do what chapter 12 and a little bit of 13 does. They have conquered a lot, they have done a lot of things, and right now they're going to make one document, a little area within the manuscript, and say, you know what, this is all the things that we've done so far. And he's basically recapping what Moses did and what Joshua has done, because we have the central, we have the southern, we have the northern conquests that are kind of ending at this time. Now the allotments are about to start, but at the very end of it, they're going to say, okay, so this is a quick rundown of everything that's happened. And we see that in in chapter 12, verse 1. Now these are the kings of the land whom the people of Israel defeated and took possession of their land beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon, with all of the Arab eastward. And then it starts labeling all the cities and stuff. Now this is Moses, remember, the king of Sihon, the Amorites, and the Heshbon, and ruler of the Arar, and the valley of the Jacob, and the boundary of the Amorites, that is half the Gilead. And he just starts naming off all of these cities, all these places, and kind of defining where really Moses really led the people to. And so this is a good refresher of all of the chapters that you have been reading, that, hey, this is all that Moses has done. And then now at the very end of chapter 12, or, well, the other half of chapter 12, verse 7 on, it says, and these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the people of Israel defeated on the west side of the Jordan. And so it has these two sections. Now, if we go back up to verse 6 real quick in chapter 12, Moses, servant of the Lord, and the people of Israel defeated them. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land for a possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Remember those guys that were sworn to come in, help defeat, and help take over the promised land, but they had lands beyond the Jordan, yes, into the desert. And so they were starting to get their allotments as well, but they kept on mentioning their names because they want to make sure that everyone knows in future generations that these people were, they were definitely faithful to their calling. They were definitely faithful to the word of God, that they had said that, you know what, we will serve Joshua, we will help you, we will do all these things, and then after that, we're going to go and enjoy our land. And so in verse 7, it says, these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the people of Israel defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad, and then all of a sudden, he starts naming off all these places. In the valley of the Lebanon and Mount Halak, and this raises toward Shir. And Joshua gave their land to the tribes of Israel as possession according to their allotments, in the hill country, and the lowland, to the Arabah, and in the slopes, and in the wilderness, and the Negev, and then the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The king of Jericho won, the king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, won, the king of Jerusalem won, the king of Hebron, and he just starts labeling all these until verse about 20, and well, no, actually through 23, really, he goes all the way to 24. And so he starts breaking all these kingdoms down. And so over the last tons of area and time, if you were a person looking back at the scroll, you would know, hey, there's a section where he's just going to name these names. So if you're looking something up, if you're trying to look at history of something, you could easily look at chapter 12 and really know exactly what happened. And if you want an expanded version of that, you just skip back to a few chapters, and that's when it goes into the more details about who came up to help this king and who were the 5 kings that came together at once. And this is giving you a very, very brief review about what has already happened. And so chapter 12 is great for that. We tend to, when we read the Bible, we tend to skip over a lot of those words. And hey, a lot of them are hard. A lot of them don't make a lot of sense, a lot of meaning. However, we can look back at history and know that the Lord is sovereign over all. He is in control over all. He's got everything under his feet. Everything he has in control. And so sometimes we do look, though, back, and we can see glimpses of things that maybe we didn't normally usually see. And so, when you say, Rahab was a part of the lineage of Jesus. But then you look on a real map of the lineages, and then you can see, wow, she wasn't even very far from King David. She wasn't even far from Solomon. She wasn't far from a lot of these amazing people. We think, just Rahab, some person in the past. But, I mean, God moved in her life and immediately altered her entire family's plan and destiny. And so we can see that even though some of the names are hard, it's still good to read them. It's still good to go through this information because we can see what God has done, because what he can do for these people, he can also do for in your own life. Now, he may not necessarily make you defeat your neighbors or whatever that you don't like, or your co-workers or whatever it may be, but you can have faith and understanding that God said he'll never leave you nor forsake you. And he led these people through all of these hardships and these battles. And whatever battle you're being led in, you can see he has led his people constantly through all of these hardships, all these battles, and he will lead you as well. And so, chapter 13, only verses 1 through 7, we'll go through. It says, "Now Joshua was old and advanced in years, and the Lord said to him," now listen to this. This is the funniest thing. You know the Lord has a sense of humor. It says, Now Joshua was old and advanced in years, and the Lord said to him, "You are old and advanced in years, and there remains yet much land to be for you to possess." And so, Joshua knowing, hey, I'm kind of an older guy now. This has been rough on me. And the Lord says, "Hey, Joshua, you're old and advanced in years." Thanks, Lord. I kind of felt that this morning when I got up. But he's making a statement. You know what? He's advanced in years. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more land to conquer. They're going to have to continue to do this. And even to the point that they will conquer, this promised land. But there's going to be other people that are going to attack you. This is not just, you got the land, you're done, it's over with. You are going to have to constantly be keeping your land up because the Lord is with you. He'll fight for you. He will do that part of his bargain, but you have to be faithful. You have to follow the Lord. You have to keep your end of the bargain up. And so we see that he says this in verse 2. It says, "This is the land that yet remains, all of the regions of the Philistines and all of those of the Gershonites from the Seir, which is the east of Egypt, northwest to the boundary of Ekron. It is counted as Canaanite. There are 5 rulers of the Philistines, those of Gaza and Ashdod and Ashkelon and Gath and Ekron." And so we see he's starting to name here. Here's the last bit of people that you do still need to deal with. And so just like in chapter 12, we see that he gives you kind of a brief overview about what has happened. He's also following up with a brief overview of what still needs to happen, just so that everyone's on the same page. You have it written down. Hey, if you have it written down, you don't really have an excuse, do you? And so the Lord is making sure they understand what their goal and his intention for them is to continue. And so in verse 4, it says, "In all the south and all the lands of the Canaanites and the Merah, and that belongs to the Sidons and Apec, and to the boundary of the Amorites." And he just keeps on going all the way down to verse 6 and all through there. And it says in verse 7, "Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half the tribe of Manasseh." Well, all of a sudden it seems to shift. Well, they're not done yet, right? Well, you have to remember this whole time, the central campaign, the southern campaign, going all the way back up to the north, and then coming back down south and having to deal with someone else again. All of these people, there's millions of people that he's probably dealing with at this moment, and he's just fighting with these mighty men and all this people, the people of Israel. Well, there's a bunch of kids, there's a bunch of women, there's a bunch of donkeys and goats and stuff. There's people everywhere, and they need to actually go to their lands and actually possess their lands, go into it and make it their own, make their homes out of it. But he needs to allot the land before he does that. You can't just have this big old bunch of people just sitting there in Gilead, where your camp is, and just hang out and say, hey, this is going to take months more. This could take weeks more. This could take only a few days. But they need to start spreading out, possessing their land, setting up their homes, getting their crops ready, getting the wells dug again, cleaning up these cities, because some of these cities were burnt pretty bad, and some of these cities they need to set up the refuge cities. Later on, we'll see in the chapters, and there's a lot more to do. And so, while you're handling all of these other people, to go and conquer, these people could be setting up their homes because you've driven out the land from their area, the people from their area. So y'all go set up all of your land, go set up your possessions, go set up all of the land that God has given you, and we're going to continue. And so he's doing this at the same time. So the Lord is making sure to let him understand, look, you need to do this as well. You're good at conquering, you're doing good, but you still have a lot of people that are kind of displaced. So let's start putting them in their places, and then let's start putting and keeping on going on the conquest and driving these people out of the land. So now therefore divide up this land for an inheritance. And in verse 8 in the next video, you'll see from here on out for several chapters really, the Lord really, he starts dividing up very specific cities even that are given to each and every one of the tribes. And so the inheritance part is about to start. So Joshua's conquesting, his toil every single day is starting to pay off. The people of Israel being faithful to God is starting to pay off, and they're about to see some of the fruit of their labor. They're about to see some of the cities. They're about to be able to expand and have a home for the first time, really before Joseph even got to Egypt. Can you imagine that? This is 400 and something years later. But finally, the people of Israel are now a nation of Israel, and this nation is finally about to have their home. Never give up on God. God can be working something in you. There could be a breakthrough on the way. It could not be on the way for a little while. However, the faithfulness of God, he will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And it's up to us to continue to toil until he says, all right, it's time for the allotments. It's time for the inheritance. That's our Christian walk. That is our everyday struggle. But God is with us. See you next time. Be blessed.